So carrying on with the illustration that I was giving, when I've pulled up the roots of weeds, tares around plants that I was growing, there was a gap between a soil where there was nothing growing and the good plants. And the good plants had to be strong enough in their root and stalk, or if I pulled up those weeds and tares too soon, the stalk and root and plant that was a good plant was in danger of falling and breaking with the wind or the heat of the day or whatever. So there is much to learn in this parable about timing. And so, having said that, let's return to this paragraph. The world has no right to doubt the truth of Christianity because there are unworthy members in the church, nor should Christians become disheartened because of these false brethren. How was it with the early church? Ananias and Sapphira joined themselves to the disciples. Simon Magus was baptized. Demas, who forsook Paul, had been counted a believer. Judas Iscariot was numbered with the apostles. The Redeemer does not want to lose one soul. His experience with Judas is recorded to show his long patience with perverse human nature, and bids us bear with it as he has borne, and has said that false brethren will be found in the church till the close of time. Correction, he has said that false brethren will be found in the church till the close of time. Christ Object Lessons, page 72, paragraph 3. So, the example I gave again, the weeds, the tares, there's examples in the Bible. And these people, Judas, Magnus, Simon Magnus, Demas, Ananias, and Sapphira, others in the Old Testament, they had an influence in the church, and for a while it seemed like that influence was positive. We've dealt with that. We've seen how this plays out on the patterns that are there. And so it's difficult. And then when those tares or weeds are rooted out by their own choice, it's still a difficult thing for plants who are truly grounded in Jesus to stay focused on Jesus. So we need to see this from the perspective of Jesus who died for us. The Redeemer does not want to lose one soul. His experience with Judas is recorded to show his long patience with perverse human nature, and he bids us bear with it as he has borne. He has said that false brethren will be found in the church till the close of time. Judas had sins that the world and the church usually don't point the finger at. An example of this that I gave in the presentation on 1888 and sexual abuse, the world would have pointed to the sins of Mary Magdalene and to the sins of Simon, who had abused her. They accepted Christ's salvation. Judas did not. There's many things to be learned about this. Page 74, paragraph 1. Notwithstanding Christ's warning, men have sought to uproot the tares, to punish those who were supposed to be evildoers. The church has had recourse to the civil power. Those who differed from the established doctrines have been imprisoned, put to torture and to death at the instigation of men who claim to be acting under the sanction of Christ. But it is the spirit of Satan, not the spirit of Christ, that inspires such acts. This is Satan's own method of bringing the world under his dominion. God has been misrepresented through the church by this way of dealing with those supposed to be heretics. This happened especially during the Middle Ages. All the deaths and martyrs that occurred during that time by the acts of the church in union with the civil power. And then that carried through into the United States when that happened to Native Americans and many other people. So there's many things to learn from this one paragraph. And this also happens, I believe, to those who are caught in the type of sins that Mary Magdalene and Simon had, or other addictions. And when the spirit of Satan comes into it, that hinders the gospel and true salvation and recovery. Not judgment and condemnation of others, but humility and distrust of self is the teaching of Christ's parable. Not all that is sown in the field is good seed. The fact that men are in the church does not prove them to be Christians. This one paragraph is the focus of this parable. That's what it says very clearly. People are getting off track if they're not focusing on humility and distrust of self and not judging or condemning others. They're getting off track. They're not listening to this. There are 3 more paragraphs. I'm going to try to get through them and then do a presentation beginning this series and maybe ending it to have some conclusions. The tares closely resembled the wheat, while the blades were green. But when the field was white for the harvest, the worthless weeds bore no likeness to the wheat that bowed under the weight of its full, ripe heads. Sinners who make a pretension of piety mingle for a time with the true followers of Christ, and the semblance of Christianity is calculated to deceive many. But in the harvest of the world there will be no likeness between good and evil. Then those who have joined the church, but who have not joined Christ, will be manifested. Many are focusing on who they think are the wheat and the tares, or the 2 classes of worshipers, and they may be misjudging this because it says that this is those who have not joined Christ. The tares are permitted to grow among the wheat, to have all the advantages of sun and shower. But in the time of harvest ye shall return, and discern between the righteous and the wicked, between him that serveth God and him that serveth him not. Malachi 3:18. Christ himself will decide who are worthy to dwell with the family of heaven. He will judge every man according to his words and his works. Profession is as nothing in the scale. It is character that decides destiny. So who's deciding? Christ. Christ is the one who can discern character and who are the wheat and the tares. The Savior does not point forward to a time when all the tares become wheat. The wheat and tares grow together until the harvest, the end of the world. Then the tares are bound in bundles to be burned, and the wheat is gathered into the garner of God. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of heaven. Then the Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and shall cast them into a furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Follow the progression. The harvest, the end of the world. Tares are bound into bundles and gathered. The righteous shine forth. The Son of Man sends forth his angels, and they gather out of the kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and cast them into a furnace of fire, where there's wailing and gnashing of teeth. Follow the progression. This is the end of the world. We would be seeing those things happening. Be careful how you judge. We all need to be careful how we judge on this and discern truth. This is the conclusion to our study on tares among wheat from the book Christ Object Lessons. So I talked in the introduction about learning to discern counterfeit versus the genuine. And of course the genuine is Jesus, and the genuine we find as we study the Bible and other writings that we trust. So I'm going to make a couple of other suggestions that might be helpful to you from presentations that are on the Awaken Ministries website. One is there is a presentation on recovery from doomsday, and this examines having PTSD around doomsday, or in other words, Bible prophecy, or our awareness of end-time events. I believe we all have a level of PTSD with this, so we don't want to misjudge each other. We're all struggling with similar issues in becoming aware of this. And then I want to suggest that the study that's called Of Signs and the Siege, this is about the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70 and the events leading up to that. And as you study that, there's some things to notice. For example, there were 5 really religious parties during that time: the Essenes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Zealots, and also the Galileans. They all were Jews. Some had some truth, some had falsehoods, some more than others, and some of them would, of course, point fingers at each other. So there's some lessons to be learned from that study and what we see happening in the religious world around us and the things that people are teaching, and we want to accurately discern truth. Then the study on 1989 and Bible prophecy. Then the study on 9/11, events and prophecy. Then the study on 1888 and sexual abuse by religious authority. There are things to be learned from all these studies that I think will apply in discerning genuine versus counterfeit, or tares among wheat. Then the study on surviving the fellowship, because we need to have skills in surviving the fellowship during this time. And the study on foundations for service. We need to have skills in all these areas. I'm not presenting myself as knowing everything, but I am just presenting to you and offering what has helped me in this journey. We are all in a journey to discern truth and follow Jesus, and we're looking towards heaven, towards when Jesus